Hey, my name's Ethan. I'm 24, living in a small apartment on the edge of Chicago, Illinois. Up until a few months ago, I was a handyman fixing leaky faucets and creaky doors for a property management company. It was steady work, but I got restless. I've always liked building things, figuring out how pieces fit together, so I quit to take online courses in interior architecture. It's a gamble. My savings are thin, and I'm piecing together freelance repair gigs to cover rent. My life's simple: coffee in the morning, study sessions in the afternoon, and pick up basketball with friends on weekends. I'm not big on dating, had a couple flings that went nowhere. I like things straightforward, no complications. My best friend Liam has been my rock since college. He's a year younger, works at a sporting goods store, and has this infectious energy that pulls people in. We bonded over late-night pizza runs and arguing about basketball stats. Liam has an older sister, Sophia, who's 36. I've met her a few times at his place, family barbecues, a random birthday party. She's always been distant. Not rude, just guarded, like she's sizing you up from behind a wall. She's striking, no question, tall with dark hair she usually wears up, and this quiet intensity that makes you feel like she's seen more than she lets on. But our interactions were always short, just a nod or a, "Hey, good to see you," before she'd slip back into whatever conversation she was having with Liam's mom or her friends. I figured she saw me as her kid brother's buddy. Nothing more. Sophia got divorced about a year ago, Liam told me once. 7 years of marriage to some big-shot consultant who was never around. It messed her up, he said, but she didn't like talking about it. She moved into a new apartment in a quieter part of the suburbs near a yoga studio where she started teaching classes. I didn't think much about her beyond that she was Liam's sister, off limits in that unspoken way. Last week, Liam called me out of the blue. "Yo, Ethan, you free tomorrow?" he asked, his voice crackling through my phone's cheap speaker. Sophia needs help with some furniture in her new place. She got one of those flat-pack bookshelves. But you know she's useless with a screwdriver. You're good at that stuff, right? I laughed. Yeah, I can handle a bookshelf. What's in it for me? Free beer next time we're out, he said. Come on, man. Help me out. She's been stressed and I'm stuck at work all day. I shrugged, figuring it was no big deal. All right, text me the address. He sent it over: a third-floor apartment in a low-rise building about 20 minutes from my place. I didn't think twice about it, just another favor for a friend. The next evening, I pulled up to Sophia's building. A brick complex with ivy creeping up the sides and a small courtyard out front. It was dusk, the sky bruised with clouds promising rain. I grabbed my toolbox from the trunk of my beat-up Honda and took the stairs to the third floor, the air smelling faintly of wet pavement. I knocked on her door, expecting a quick job: slap the shelf together, maybe make small talk and head home. Sophia opened the door, and I froze for half a second. She was wearing an oversized white button-up shirt that hit just above her knees. The sleeves rolled up her dark hair tied in a loose, messy bun. She held a mug of tea, steam curling up in the dim light of the hallway. No makeup, no pretense. Just her, raw and real, with a kind of strength in her posture that said she'd been through hell and come out standing. Ethan, she said, her voice even but cool. Liam said you'd come. Thanks for this. No problem, I said, stepping inside. The apartment was small but cozy, still half unpacked. Cardboard boxes were stacked against one wall. A yoga mat rolled up in a corner, and the faint scent of lavender hung in the air, probably from a diffuser on the counter. Where's the shelf? She pointed to a flat box leaning against the living room wall. There, instructions are in it, but I warn you, they're useless. She paused, her eyes flicking over me like she was measuring something. I don't usually let strangers in my house. Liam trusts people too much, but you're an exception. I nodded, catching the edge in her tone. Not unfriendly, just cautious. I'll try not to break anything, I said, half joking, and got to work. The living room was sparse, just a sofa, a coffee table, and a few books scattered around. Sophia sat on the sofa, flipping through a paperback, her legs tucked under her. She didn't say much, but I could feel her watching me, her gaze steady and deliberate, like she was trying to figure me out. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't exactly relaxed either, just different. I started unpacking the shelf pieces, laying them out on the floor. The rain had started outside, a soft patter against the windows. I glanced at her once, catching her eyes before she looked back at her book. Something about the way she sat there, so composed, but so alone, stuck with me. This wasn't just a quick job anymore. It felt like I'd stepped into something bigger, something I couldn't quite name yet. The rain picked up as I worked on the bookshelf, the soft patter turning into a steady drum against the windows of Sophia's apartment. The living room was small, lit by a single floor lamp that cast a warm glow over the scattered pieces of wood, and screws spread out on the rug. I knelt on the floor, sorting through the instruction manual, which was as useless as Sophia had warned. Half the steps were in Swedish, and the diagrams looked like they were drawn by someone who'd never seen a shelf. I muttered under my breath, trying to match a dowel to a hole that didn't seem to exist. Sophia was still on the sofa, her paperback open, but untouched for the past few minutes. I could feel her eyes on me, not constant, but every now and then, like she was checking my progress. Or maybe something else. "You sure you don't want to call Liam for this?" I said, glancing over with a half smile. "I'm starting to think this shelf is cursed." She let out a small laugh, the first I'd heard from her. It was low, almost reluctant, but it softened the room. "If Liam was here, he'd probably break it before you got halfway done," she said, closing her book and setting it on the coffee table. "You're doing fine, better than I would have." I nodded, focusing back on the shelf, but her voice lingered in my head. It wasn't just polite small talk. It had a weight to it, like she meant it. I kept working, the screwdriver clicking as I tightened bolts. The rain outside was louder now, a constant hum that made the apartment feel like its own little world. So I said, trying to keep things light, "You liking the yoga teaching gig? Liam says you're basically a pro already." She leaned back, her arms crossed loosely. "It's different. I used to work in marketing, all deadlines and stress. Yoga's quieter. Helps me think." She paused, her eyes flicking to the window. "Or maybe it just keeps me from thinking too much." I glanced at her, catching the way her expression shifted like she'd let something slip. "I get that," I said, setting down the screwdriver. "I quit my handyman job to study interior design. Thought it'd be a fresh start, but half the time I'm just staring at sketches, wondering if I made a mistake." She tilted her head, studying me. "You don't seem like the type to second-guess yourself." "Looks can lie," I said, shrugging. "I'm good at fixing things, not so much at building a life from scratch." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. "You're here putting together my shelf. That's building something." I chuckled, but her words hit deeper than I expected. We fell into a quiet rhythm after that, me assembling the shelf while she stayed on the sofa, occasionally answering a question about where she wanted it placed. At one point, I needed an extra hand to hold a panel steady. "Hey, can you grab this for a sec?" I asked, nodding at the wooden plank, wobbling in my grip. She got up, setting her mug on the table, and came over. Her fingers brushed mine as she held the panel, and for a split second, she froze her breath, catching just enough for me to notice. Our eyes met, and I saw something flicker in hers. Surprise, maybe, or something heavier. She didn't pull away right away, her hand lingering against mine before she stepped back, clearing her throat. "That good?" she asked, her voice a touch unsteady. "Yeah, perfect," I said, my own voice rougher than I meant. I focused on the screws, my heart thumping harder than it should have. The moment passed, but the air felt different now, charged with something unspoken. The shelf was done in about an hour, standing tall against the wall, a little wobbly, but solid enough. I stepped back, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Not bad, right?" Sophia stood up, inspecting it with a nod. "Better than I expected," she said, then glanced at me. "You're handy." Liam wasn't lying. I grinned, packing up my tools. "I try. Anything else need fixing while I'm here?" I was half joking, but her eyes scanned the room, landing on the kitchen. "Actually," she said, "the cabinet door's been sticking. I keep meaning to call someone, but she trailed off, shrugging. Say no more, I said, grabbing my toolbox and heading to the kitchen. The cabinet hinge was loose and easy fix, but while I was at it, I noticed a flickering bulb in the hallway light. Mind if I check this too? I asked, already reaching for my pliers. Go for it, she said, leaning against the counter, watching me work. I swapped the bulb, then caught her eyeing the bathroom door. There's a leak in the shower, isn't there? I said, reading her expression. She laughed. A real one this time, and it caught me off guard. You're too good at this, she said. Yeah, the shower's been dripping. I was going to ignore it, but since you're offering, by the time I tightened the shower head and fixed the cabinet, it was pushing 9 p.m. and the rain was coming down harder. Sophia stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, looking almost amused. You didn't have to do all that, she said. But thank you. No big deal, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. Beat studying floor plans all night. She hesitated, then gestured to the fridge. You want to stay for dinner? There's nothing fancy. Salad. Some bread I baked yesterday. I've got wine, too, if you're not driving right away. I glanced at the window, the rain now a full-on downpour. Yeah, sure, I said, surprised at how easy it felt to say yes. As long as it's not more work for you. She shook her head, pulling out a bowl and a loaf of crusty bread. It's the least I can do. She put on a jazz playlist from her phone, the notes soft and smoky, filling the small apartment with warmth. We sat at her tiny kitchen table, eating salad and bread, sipping red wine from mismatched glasses. It was simple, but it felt right, like I wasn't just Liam's friend crashing her space. As we talked, she loosened up, telling me about her yoga classes, how she'd stumbled into teaching after the divorce. It's not about fixing everything, she said, twirling her glass. It's about finding a way to breathe again. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw the weight she carried, the kind you don't notice until it's laid bare. I nodded, not sure what to say. The rain kept falling, the jazz kept playing, and I realized I wasn't in a hurry to leave. Not yet. The jazz playlist looped softly in the background, the notes weaving through the hum of the rain outside Sophia's apartment. We'd finished dinner, salad, bread, and a second glass of red wine that made the edges of the evening feel softer. The kitchen table was small, our knees almost touching under it, and I was hyper-aware of every movement, every glance. Sophia leaned back in her chair, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass, her expression relaxed, but still guarded, like she was deciding how much to let me see. I tried to keep things light, talking about the bookshelf, asking if she had any grand plans for decorating the place. But the air felt heavier now, like the rain had trapped something between us. I stood to help clear the plates, figuring it was a good excuse to move to break the tension I was starting to feel. Sophia followed me to the sink, rinsing her glass while I stacked the dishes. The kitchen was tiny, barely enough room for both of us, and I caught the faint scent of her lavender diffuser mixed with something warmer, like the citrus in her shampoo. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice low as she handed me a dish towel. You've already fixed half my apartment. I grinned, drying a plate. There's no trouble. Keeps my hands busy. I glanced at her, expecting that cool, measured look she usually gave, but her eyes were softer, watching me with an intensity that made my pulse kick up. She didn't say anything, just nodded and turned back to the sink. That's when I noticed the cabinet door again. I'd tightened the hinge earlier, but it was still sticking, catching every time she opened it to grab a fork. Hold on, I said, setting the towel down. Let me take another look at that cabinet. It's bugging me. She raised an eyebrow, a faint smile, tugging at her lips. You're relentless, aren't you? Only when it comes to broken things, I said, grabbing my screwdriver from the toolbox. I knelt by the cabinet, tweaking the hinge, testing it until it swung smoothly. Sophia stood nearby, leaning against the counter, her arms crossed. You're good at this, she said, her tone quieter now, fixing things. Most people would have given up by now. I shrugged, tightening the last screw. Guess I like a challenge. I stood wiping my hands on my jeans and caught her looking at me. Not at the cabinet, but at me, her eyes steady and unreadable. For a second, I forgot what I was doing, the screwdriver still in my hand. Anything else needs saving? I asked, half joking, trying to shake off the moment. She glanced around the apartment, her gaze landing on the hallway light, which was flickering again despite the new bulb I'd put in. That light's been driving me crazy, she said almost apologetically, and the shower's still dripping a bit. I didn't want to mention it earlier, but since you're asking, I laughed, shaking my head. You're going to owe me more than salad at this rate. I moved to the hallway, checking the light fixture. The wiring was loose and easy fix with a quick twist of my pliers. Then I headed to the bathroom, tightening the shower head until the drip stopped. Sophia followed me from a distance, leaning against the doorframe as I worked her silence louder than the jazz still playing in the background. By the time I finished, it was nearing 10 o'clock p.m., and the rain was a full-on downpour rattling the windows like it was trying to get inside. I packed up my tools, glancing at the clock. I should probably head out, I said, though the thought of driving through that storm wasn't exactly appealing. Thanks for dinner. It was nice. Sophia nodded, but she didn't move from the counter. You sure you want to go out in that? She asked, gesturing to the window. It's a mess out there. Her voice was casual, but there was something else in it. Something that made me pause. I'll be fine, I said, zipping up my toolbox. I've driven in worse. But I didn't move toward the door, not right away. The jazz had shifted to a slower track, a saxophone weaving through the rain's rhythm, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't quite name. She stepped away from the counter, crossing to the sink to rinse out the wine bottle. As she did, she spoke, her voice so soft I almost missed it. My ex, he never fixed anything. Not a shelf, not a light, not us. She paused, her hand still under the water. I spent years making excuses for him, covering for his failures, telling myself it was fine, but it wasn't. She turned off the faucet, drying her hands on a towel, and looked at me. Then you show up fixing things without being asked, without making a big deal out of it. It's quiet in a dangerous way. I froze, the screwdriver still in my hand, my heart thutching so loud I was sure she could hear it. Her words weren't just about the shelf or the light. They were about her, about the weight she carried. I wanted to say something, to tell her I got it, that I saw how strong she was, how much she'd been through. But all I managed was, I just like things to work right. She smiled, a small sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. You make it sound so simple. She stepped closer, just enough to close the gap between us, and I caught my breath. The air felt thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. Her eyes held mine, not cold anymore, but warm, searching like she was seeing me for the first time. Thanks, Ethan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For more than just the shelf. I nodded, my throat tight. The rain kept falling. The jazz kept playing, and I knew I wasn't just Liam's friend fixing her apartment anymore. Something had shifted, something I couldn't ignore, and it scared me as much as it pulled me in. The rain was relentless now, hammering the windows of Sophia's apartment like it wanted to tear the world apart. The jazz playlist had looped to a slower track, a piano and saxophone weaving together in a way that made the small kitchen feel even smaller, more intimate. We'd finished cleaning up after dinner, the dishes stacked neatly in the rack, the empty wine bottle on the counter. My toolbox sat by the door, ready to go, but I hadn't moved toward it. Sophia's words still hung in the air. You make it sound so simple. And the way she'd looked at me like she was seeing past the guy who just fixed her cabinet had my heart pounding harder than the storm outside. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 10:15 p.m. The rain showed no signs of stopping the streets outside. Probably a mess of puddles and blurred lights. I should get going. I said, more to break the silence than because I wanted to. I grabbed my jacket from the back of a chair, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Sophia was standing by the sink, drying her hands on a towel, her expression unreadable in the dim light of the kitchen. You sure? She asked, her voice soft but deliberate, like she was weighing every word. She stepped toward the glass door leading to the balcony, looking out at the rain sheeting down. It's a nightmare out there. You could wait it out. She didn't turn around, but the way she said it wasn't just about the weather. It felt like an invitation, or maybe a question when I wasn't sure how to answer. I set my jacket down, my pulse racing. Yeah, maybe you're right. I said, my voice rougher than I meant. Don't want to end up stuck in a ditch somewhere. She turned then, her eyes catching the faint glow of the lamp. They weren't cold anymore, not like when I first walked in. There was something raw in them, something unguarded that made my chest tighten. She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter, and for a moment, we just stood there, the jazz and the rain filling the space between us. The air felt heavy like it was holding its breath. I tried to keep things light, nodding toward the balcony. You always stand out there in storms like this. Or is that just a yoga thing? She laughed, a quiet sound that broke the tension for a second. Not usually, she said, stepping closer to the glass. But tonight it feels different, like the rain's trying to say something. She paused, her fingers brushing the edge of the door frame. You ever feel like that? Like the world's telling you to stop and listen? I nodded, stepping closer without thinking. Sometimes, usually when I'm trying to avoid something. I didn't mean to say it out loud, but it slipped out and her eyes flicked to mine, sharp and searching, avoiding what she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed, my throat dry. I don't know, I said, but that was a lie. I knew exactly what I was avoiding. The way her presence pulled at me. The way her words in the kitchen earlier had cracked something open. I was Liam's friend here to fix a shelf, not to stand in her kitchen. Feeling like the ground was shifting under me. She didn't push, just looked out at the rain again, her silhouette framed against the glass. Then, almost too quiet to hear, she said, my ex. He never listened. Not to me, not to the rain, not to anything that mattered. I spent years pretending it was okay, pretending I didn't need more, but I did. She turned to me, her eyes locking onto mine, and the distance between us felt like nothing now. Then you walk in here fixing things, listening, being you. And it's dangerous, Ethan, because it makes me want to stop pretending. My heart stopped. I didn't know what to say. Didn't know if I should say anything at all. The jazz was softer now, the saxophone fading into a low hum, and the rain seemed to slow, like the world was giving us this moment. She took a step closer, close enough that I could see the faint lines around her eyes, the ones that told stories of years I hadn't been part of. Have you ever felt like someone doesn't want you to leave? She asked, her voice steady but vulnerable. Even if they don't say it. I nodded, my breath shallow. Yeah, I said, right now. She looked at me, her expression softening, and then she said it, her voice so low it was almost a whisper. I don't want to be Liam's sister tonight. I want to be a woman who's learning to be alone, but terrified of staying that way forever. The words hit me like a punch, tearing down every boundary I'd been trying to hold on to. I stood there frozen, my mind racing with 1,000 reasons to step back. Liam, her divorce. The fact that I was just supposed to be here for a shelf. But my body didn't listen. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing the back of her hand. Her skin was warm, and for a moment, she tensed like she might pull away, but she didn't. Her hand stayed there, steady, her eyes, never leaving mine. We didn't move closer, didn't kiss, didn't cross that final line. But we stood there, inches apart, the rain pounding outside, the jazz wrapping around us like a secret. My heart was hammering, and I could see her chest rise and fall, her breath just as unsteady as mine. Sophia, I said, my voice barely audible. I don't know what this is. Neither do I, she said, her fingers curling slightly against mine. But it's real. The moment stretched heavy and fragile until the rain slowed to a drizzle and the jazz track ended, leaving us in near silence. She stepped back first, breaking the contact, but her eyes stayed on me. You don't have to go, she said, gesturing to the sofa. It's late. I've got blankets. I nodded, my throat too tight to argue. She grabbed a spare blanket and pillow from a closet, setting them on the sofa. Good night, Ethan, she said, her voice soft but steady like she was trying to hold on to herself. Good night, Sophia, I said, watching her disappear into her bedroom. I lay down on the sofa, the rain a faint hum now, but sleep didn't come. All I could think about was her hand in mine, her words, and the way she'd looked at me like I was more than just the guy who fixed herself. Morning light crept through the blinds of Sophia's apartment, soft and gray, the kind that makes everything feel quieter than it should. I woke up on the sofa, the blanket tangled around my legs, the faint smell of lavender still lingering in the air. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, leaving only the occasional drip from the balcony outside. My head was heavy, not from the wine, but from the weight of what had happened, or almost happened. Sophia's words kept replaying. I don't want to be Liam's sister tonight. Her hand in mine, the way her eyes had held me like she was daring me to see her. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. The sound of a coffee maker gurgling pulled me out of my thoughts. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, and saw Sophia in the kitchen, her back to me. She was still in an oversized shirt, the same one from last night, her hair a little messier, now falling in loose waves over her shoulders. She moved with the same quiet confidence I'd noticed before. But there was something softer about her this morning, like the storm had washed away some of her edges. She turned holding 2 mugs of coffee and caught me watching. "Morning," she said, her voice steady but warm. "You sleep okay?" "Yeah," I said, my voice rough from sleep. "Sofa's not bad. Thanks for letting me crash." I stood folding the blanket, trying to act normal, like last night hadn't shifted something between us. She handed me a mug, her fingers brushing mine for a split second. It wasn't deliberate, but it sent a jolt through me, a reminder of that moment in the kitchen. We stood there sipping coffee, the apartment silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge. Neither of us mentioned last night, not her words, not the way we'd stood so close, not the way her hand had stayed in mine. It was like we'd agreed without speaking to let it sit for now. But the air felt different, charged with something unspoken, like we both knew we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. Sophia leaned against the counter, her mug cradled in both hands. "You know," she said, her tone casual but deliberate, "I was thinking about getting another shelf. Something bigger, maybe for the hallway. You think you could handle it?" Her lips curved into a small smile, and there was a glint in her eyes, playful but careful, like she was testing the waters. I laughed, the tension easing a bit. "You trying to turn me into your personal handyman?" I said, setting my mug down. "I'm gonna need more than coffee for that." Her smile widened, but it didn't hide the way her eyes searched mine, like she was looking for an answer to a question she hadn't asked. "We'll see," she said, her voice softer now. "I'm not in a rush." I nodded, my throat tight. The way she said it, the way she looked at me, it wasn't just about shelves. It was about last night, about whatever this was becoming. I wanted to say something, to ask what she meant, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I grabbed my toolbox and jacket, glancing at the clock. It was barely 8 a.m., but I felt like I needed to move to get some air before I said something I couldn't take back. "I should head out," I said, slinging my bag over my shoulder. "Got some studying to do. Thanks for the coffee and everything." Sophia followed me to the door, her bare feet quiet on the wood floor. "Anytime," she said, leaning against the frame as I stepped into the hallway. I turned back, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Her eyes weren't cold anymore, not like the Sophia I'd met at Liam's parties. They were open, unguarded, like she was letting me see her for the first time. "Take care, Ethan," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You too," I said, holding her gaze a second longer than I should have. I walked down the stairs, the cool morning air hitting my face as I stepped outside. The city was waking up, cars humming past the sky, still heavy with clouds. I got in my car and sat there for a minute, my hands on the wheel, trying to make sense of it all. Last night wasn't a dream. It was real, raw, and terrifying in a way I couldn't explain. By the time I got back to my apartment, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't have saved. "You left a screwdriver on the counter. I kept the whole toolbox out just in case you want to fix something else or something not on the list." No name, but I knew it was Sophia. My heart kicked up and I stared at the screen, a smile tugging at my lips. I didn't reply, not yet. But as I sat there, the city buzzing outside my window, I knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning. Something unnamed, something fragile, but something real. And for now that was